I have a talk prepared. I do have a talk prepared. So I want to start out, we are talking about leadership, and leadership, we're using the definition that Brene Brown provides, and that is that anyone who takes responsibility for finding the potential in people and processes, and who has the courage to develop that potential. Right? So leadership is not like a manager. It's not a leadership in name, which of course, even as a leader, is the weakest kind of leadership. Leadership is the way you suit up and show up and stand up in every situation. It's feeling really personal to me right now, because I got to tell you, I am not a good manager. And there's one story that says that if you're not a good manager, you can't be a good leader. And I've struggled with that story because when I say I'm not a good manager, like I'm seriously not a good manager. But I'm a good leader because I have trained my eyes and my heart to see potential. Now I'm going to tell you a story, and then I'm going to read you something from a colleague of mine that he posted, and I'm not sure I can fit this into my talk, but I feel compelled to share it, so we're just going to see what happens. The process to become a minister for the Centers for Spiritual Living is that you get a master's degree, and the master's degree is in a branch of philosophy called consciousness studies. And then you also do all of the stuff about how to manage a church and how to do pastoral care and all this other kind of stuff. And it takes a minimum, I think it takes a minimum of 4 years. And I did it in 3, but that may have been a mistake. Okay, so here's the point. You do all that, and then in other denominations you get they ordain you, which is for life. And one really great thing that the Centers for Spiritual Living does is they don't ordain you. You actually have to be about the work of ministry for a while before you can do what they call an ordination panel. And so the minimum to do that work is 2 years, and I waited 4 because my thing is, look, my call is to God, and nothing else gets in the way of that. Right? And so I got to be sure that if I'm like swearing to something for the rest of my life, then I better be ready. So I waited until I was ready. And I knew that no matter how I worked, where I worked, or what I did, that I had taken to heart the principles of New Thought. Being that we are all one, we are born of love, we live in love, we are powerful beyond our own imagination until we learn to reimagine, right? And I took all that to heart. And so then I arranged to go do my ordination panel. And everybody had, I was overjoyed because I was finally ready. And so I went in, and people had said, it's great. It's pretty much, it's a celebration. I mean, they're there to support you. And I go in and I sit down, and it is like a firing squad. There are 3 other ministers there, and they're frowning before we even start the conversation. And so I'm like, that's okay. I've done my spiritual work, so they asked me to do an invocation. Okay, and so they start asking me questions, and I'm really excited to share everything that I've learned about what it means to be a leader and what ministry is all about. And they keep asking me questions, and 45 minutes later, it's really clear they're not going to pass me. And they tell me that I don't understand what it means to be a minister. And what they meant was, you don't understand what it means to be the boss of everything. And I had been learning about shared leadership and creating a culture of empowerment and all these other things, and I was really excited about it. And they were not. So I didn't pass. I failed my ordination panel. And then I began the work of reconciliation, like some self-forgiveness, some introspection. That they required that I get a ministerial mentor. And about 6 or 8 months into that process, they had released a report from Home Office about, it was called the Cultural Integrity Committee. And what was in that report was that we needed to start doing ministry exactly the way that I had described ministry in my ordination panel. And I still can't tell you if I was mad or glad or shocked or what it was, because what they were saying was that the culture that we had created, the organization had created, was dysfunctional and out of integrity with the principles, right? And that then they went on to begin to adopt all of those cultural practices that I was so excited about that day. And I tell you that not because, I'm like super duper A student, like I was way ahead of the curve. That's not the story. The story is that what was alive in me was not yet alive in them. And that's been, in a lot of ways, that's been the story of my life. Right? What's alive in me, what I see is possible, what I hold dear, what I know is important, what I know is irrelevant, is oftentimes not shared by the people around me. So now let me tell you about this quote that a colleague posted. Now, one of the in New Thought, in the Science of Mind and Spirit, one of the things that have been emphasized to the point of being like excessive is that we change ourselves. We don't worry about the world. We do our own work, and then we pray for the world. And the story was that that's what Ernest Holmes taught, and Ernest Holmes being the founder of the Science of Mind and Spirit. Well, that's not what Ernest Holmes taught. That was the way that what Ernest Holmes said was taken up in a hyper-individualistic, highly industrialized 5 decades in the middle of the last century. Do you see what I'm saying? It's like that's what they saw because that's what was necessary, they thought. But the truth of the matter is, if I do the work of changing myself to the point where my cup runneth over, do I just keep letting the cup drop on the ground? Do I just run over the sides? Or do I actually treat or pray and move my feet? Get into the world. See, that's been like this, the young timer. I'm somewhere in the middle, but let's say the more progressive ministers, they're like, no, we have work to do in the world based on our principles. And the old timers say that's not our job to do. And that's how progress happens. Right? So the old timers are saying y'all are heretics, and the young timers are saying whatever, the world, we got something to do here. Now, just as an aside, I have a little thing on my email that says heresies are really sudden explosions of faith. Dead traditions do not produce them. Okay, so now on to my illustrious colleague. His name is David Alexander, and he has recently moved from the West Coast and taken a pulpit in Atlanta. Public service announcement. For those of you who think some preachers, like myself, have gotten too political, remember both the Christian scriptures and the Jewish sacred texts have always dealt with issues of politics, i.e., they have always warned of the dangers of empires, authoritarian rule, and forgetting to care for each other. And for those who say New Thought is not the same theology, I say do your homework. New Thought has always been, 1, grounded in both Christian and universal spiritual truths, and 2, concerned with the emancipation and liberation of humanity, beginning with yourself and extending to that which you are one with, which is everything and everyone. If you want a church that will pump you up with some motivational rah-rah and self-promoting booster juice, then go to a Tony Robbins seminar. Not that there's anything wrong with Tony Robbins. If you want theological relevance that will awaken you to your truth, power, and spiritual magnificence, which is the only thing that can liberate humanity from its current self-destructive path and create a world that works for everyone. I'll see you Sunday. See, David, he sees a role for our movement and for the people who are awakened to their spiritual magnificence in communities like this, right? We don't do it just for ourselves. We do it first for ourselves. And then we go out and we practice what we have learned here in every arena. So that we are the places where Spirit shows up. I'm just going to give up on that talk. The world needs what only you have to give. The world needs what only you have to give. And you don't have to do everything. That's not what we're called to. We are called to bring the essential self that each of us is and offer that as a gift. And the world is I don't know if y'all have noticed or not, but the world's in need of gifts right now. And there's no time to hide your light under a bushel. None. So I'm looking around this room, and I know most of you, or at least some of you, and so I can say with absolute certainty that if your gift is singing, then there's a lot of songs that need to be sung to awaken the joy and the perseverance that are required in these times. If you're a gadfly, meaning the person who is skilled in rhetoric and at kind of poking at people and situations to first awaken their ire and then their understanding, there is a role for you. If you are a person that can give a lot of money because you are really good at making it, there is a role for you. If you are good at managing the details of an event or a process or a project, there is a role for you. If you teach poetry, if you raise children, if you show up when your nephew needs you, there is a place for you. And the time for all of us is now. We really can't afford passengers anymore. So now I want to tell you something that kind of goes with the talk that I gave a couple of weeks ago. When I first, you guys have heard this before, and I don't want to run into the ground, but you know that I had a major awakening when Trayvon Martin was killed. I had a major awakening because I didn't know that I didn't grow up in the same country that Candace and Ocean Femi and April and Jariva did. I did not know that. And so it was a huge awakening for me. And when people that you love are wounded by things in the world, the only thing you can do is get on board and say, what do I need to do? What do I need to do? And then because I am like often the last person to notice what is right in front of me, I looked around this community, HeartSpace Spiritual Center, and I saw that Michael and I had a child, and that child was biracial, and I looked at the community, and it was mixed race, and I was like, wow, there's people paying money to get coaching on how to create what showed up here on accident. Right? And so thus launched me into the world of learning. And Tracy Brown, God bless her, bestowed upon me a learner's permit. That's what she calls it, a learner's permit. And what does that mean? That means that you can actually, just like driving a car, you can actually screw up and then correct yourself. And it's every profound issue that faces us right now is complex and yet simple, right? The spiritual truth is incredibly simple, but systemic issues are complex, right? So anyway, I go wading into the water and, don't know about alligators or anything, and every time I'd screw up, somebody would school me, and I would go, oh, thank goodness I've got a learner's permit. And so I tell you this because as you suit up, show up, stand up, and speak up, you will screw up. Let me say that again. As you suit up, show up, stand up, and speak up, you will screw up. And we're taught, a lot of us were conditioned, it was really profoundly affected listening to all of the messages that we received as women, as children, as people of color, as, whatever the particulars, as a gay person, raised in Wisconsin on a farm, or, whatever it is where you're you got the message that you were other. And there's a lot of messaging that goes along with that. But one of the things that happens with that message is that we then have to protect ourselves. And we begin to think that the armor is the self. Right? Such that we can't actually say, I screwed that up. Because it fractures your identity. Because you don't realize that the thing is just your armor. So when you screw up, all you're doing is rearranging the loose-fitting garment that is your learning conditioned self. Screwing up is the way that the soul becomes wise. I haven't really talked about it from the pulpit here much. I talked about my first trip, but 6 or 8 weeks ago, or maybe longer, I don't know, I've lost track of time. I started feeling like I need to go to El Paso. Because the situation at the border was becoming more than I could bear. And so the story I told myself was, well, you don't speak Spanish, you're not an attorney, you're not a social worker, you're not a nurse, you're not a doctor. What are you going to do when you get there? So eventually I went, like, after slapping that call down repeatedly. And then, Michael, my beloved, said, I can handle things here, basically. It's okay if you need to go, go. And I went, and I just suited up, and I showed up, and I wiggled into places I had no business being, and then I found something that only I could do. Right? And let me tell you how that happened, because this is the power of saying yes to the thing that's burning inside you, and then just like following where it leads and being like, well, I could be completely insane. This wouldn't be the first time. But you just go ahead and do it anyway. So what I did is somehow I found my way to a shelter that was like in an undisclosed location, because there's a lot of haters, right? And they were harassing and doxing. That means like, publishing personal information about volunteers, right? So I go to El Paso, and I somehow end up in this shelter, and I end up talking to this young woman, and she hears me say I have a wife. And she comes up to me and she says, can you come back tonight after? Because we were just doing whatever. We made hundreds of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. We filled up water bottles. We took people to the bus station and the airport to send them across the country to their sponsors. We did just a lot of random stuff. And so anyway, she hears me say this. She says, well, after you're done with the airport and bus runs, can you come back? So I go back and I show up, and then there's this guy. And this guy is an artist. He's a lifelong Borderlands resident. And he says to me, I know this woman, and she runs the only trans and LGBTQ shelter in Mexico, because migrants, LGBTQ and trans migrants, can't go to the shelters. And so I talked to him. And I said, well, I can raise a little more money for you. And then when I went back, I got to go meet her, this amazing woman who is doing work that nobody else could do, just because at some point last December, 5 LGBTQ and trans people were killed in Juarez in 1 month, and she said, I can't take it anymore. So I go to this house, and it's falling down. Like the roof is caving in. That's how bad it is. And to my first world eyes, I'm like, y'all, it knocked me out. I couldn't hardly function for a couple of days. It was so overwhelming. The need was so overwhelming. And but you know what? In the 5 months that she's been doing it, 264 LGBTQ and trans people have safely crossed into the United States, and they're now with sponsors, falling down roof or not. See, she would not be distracted, and I couldn't help but be distracted. Right? So if you contributed, a lot of people in a lot of places, some people I don't even know, raised $8,200. One of the things they were able to do with that is get a meeting with a city council person in Juarez, Ciudad Juarez. Now, I don't know if this is called a business transaction or a bribe. In a lot of places it's the same thing. Okay, you know what I got a couple days ago? I got pictures of the new place, the new shelter for the LGBTQ and trans women. It's on loan from a businessman in Ciudad Juarez. And I like to tell myself that the little bit of money we all threw in paid for the bribe, or the meeting, or the attorney who knew the next person. So now they have an 8-room shelter with 4 working bathrooms. They had 1 for 37 people before. See, so I said, what the hell, I'm going to go to El Paso. And this woman, this nurse, this amazing human being who herself had risen from the ashes of tribalism and racism that is Mexico and its relationship to its indigenous people. And she said, the hell with that. I'm going to do this thing. And then this thing, somebody wandered in and another person wandered in, and all of a sudden there's a new thing happening. So you saying yes to your own growth And then you offering that growth as a gift to the world. That's why you're here. Mary Manamorsey calls it the discovery and delivery of the authentic self. And none of us has any idea what's going to come of it. But you know what comes of it if you don't risk anything? Nothing. Nothing. Living our essence, leading ourselves from our own spiritual self, the highest, most God-centered, risk-taking, intuitive, screwing it all up, powerful self, is what it means to bring and actually embody this spiritual tradition, this set of ideals. And I think sometimes we think it needs to be big. We think we need to be on a big platform with 500 people, or doing, being Tony Robbins or Brene Brown or somebody. We don't. You find the thing that feels good, that you're competent at. And you got to know that without your piece of that pie, without your piece of the whole doesn't work as well. So I just want to invite everybody. I want you to feel the fire under your feet. I want you to feel the discomfort in your solar plexus that lets you know that something is seeking to be born as you, for you, through you, and it's something only you can do. And then I want you to be willing to screw it up as you midwife it into existence. And that is all I have to say about that. Pray with me, won't you? There is but one life. It is going on everywhere. It is fully present in each of us at every moment. For this one life, it's not even just an energy. It's a thing that can't be trapped in space or time. It's the very ground of being and the height of being itself. This one life, it is God. It is my life right now. It is your life right now. It is the life of this country and this planet right now, even if we can't see it at first glance. One life, God's life, the life of each of us, right here, right now. I speak at this moment a blessing on every person in this room, that they feel that fire, that they know that they can and must stand up and be counted. That beautiful quote, don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive and go do that. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. Alive to their voices, alive to their poetry, alive to their details, alive to their parenthood. Alive to their humor. Alive. So as I speak this blessing for everyone in this room, I simultaneously call forth that which makes each person come alive. And I affirm that each of us experiences our call as an unquenchable thirst, a fire that simply cannot be put out. It pursues us and taps us on the shoulder wakes us up maybe at 2 a.m. until we finally say yes to it. And once we give that divine yes, then doors open, possibilities happen, potentials emerge in ways we never could have imagined. All activated by saying yes to the sacred call of simply being oneself. God, I'm grateful for this life, and I'm grateful for you people, and I'm grateful for this place and these voices, this music. And I am grateful in this moment to be so awake and aware and convicted. For this and so much more, I'm grateful. And so I affirm it and I declare it by saying, and so it is. Ashe. Aho.
Open wide.